What is up, everyone? Welcome back to GrayDays TV, and today I'm going to be talking about the mysterious death of Kendrick Johnson. Kendrick Johnson was 17 years old at the time of his death and lived with his family in Valdosta, Georgia. He attended Lowndes High School, and his family and friends described him as a sweet and quiet boy. He was also a three-sport athlete, and he dreamed of one day playing professional football. But unfortunately, those dreams were cut short when his body was found upside down in a rolled up wrestling mat. So the question is, what happened? On Wednesday, January 9th, 2013, Kendrick returned to school after Christmas break. And I want to go ahead and point out now, before I forget, LHS actually had two gyms at the time, and the old gym was used a lot less frequently than the new gym. And there were several large wrestling mats that were basically in permanent storage in the older gym. Now, these mats were rolled up and stored upright, and they were about 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. And many students, including Kendrick, used these mats to store their personal items, so they wouldn't have to pay locker fees. But during Christmas break, a few more wrestling mats were added to that permanent storage location in the corner. And because of that, what used to be a pretty easy place to get to for Kendrick became a little harder to get to. So at about 1:30 p.m. on Thursday, January 10th, video surveillance captured Kendrick entering the old gym, presumably to get a pair of sneakers that he shared with another student that was stored in the wrestling mats. And in this footage, no one is seen following Kendrick into the gym, and no one is seen entering the gym until about 3 minutes after Kendrick entered the gym. And although surveillance footage captures Kendrick entering the gym, it never captures him leaving the gym. And Kendrick was later marked absent for a weightlifting class that started shortly after video surveillance sees him entering the old gym. And after not returning home after his parents assumed he was at a basketball game, his parents officially reported Kendrick missing.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I'm calling. My son didn't come home from school today, and he still haven't got here.
Okay, what's your son's name?
Kendrick Johnson.
So on the morning of Friday, January 11th, Kendrick's mother, Jackie, went to the school to inform them that her son was missing. And the administration did try and help her in this situation, and they actually helped her print out missing person flyers to be handed out later on. Meanwhile, at about 10:30 a.m., a few female students who were in the old gym filling out surveys noticed socks sticking out of a upright mat. Thinking it was a joke, another student climbed to the top of the bleachers to look inside of that mat, and that is when that student saw the body of Kendrick Johnson. He then tried to pull Kendrick's body out of the mat, and while he was doing this, another student called 911 using their cell phone. And sometime later, with the help of a teacher, the student was able to push over the mat and partially pull Kendrick out of the mat head first. And that is when they noticed the smell and the state of decomposition that his body was in. And it was pretty obvious at that point that Kendrick was dead. And after realizing this, the teacher immediately made all the students in the old gym go to the new gym, and the school was put into lockdown.
Come to Lowndes High School now. There's a dead body out here.
Okay, where at, sir?
Lowndes High School in the old gym.
Then Jackie Johnson, Kendrick's mother, got the news that no mother would ever want to get. Her son was dead. And it was later determined that Kendrick had been dead in that inverted position for about 21 hours before he was found. Lowndes County began an immediate investigation, and every student that was in the gym that day was found and immediately interviewed that same day. Now, as far as what the actual scene looked like, 2 pairs of shoes were found in the mat with Kendrick. 1 pair were shoes he had been wearing, and they were found off his feet on top of his body near his feet and legs. And the other pair, the pair it is believed he was trying to retrieve, were on the floor underneath his body near his head. There was blood found on the scene inside of the mat, but there was no blood found on the outside of the mat. There was also some old blood found on a column near the mats, but that blood was determined not to be Kendrick's, as well as a bloody tissue found in a trash can that was later determined to be female. And a girl later came forward and stated that the bloody tissue was hers, and it came after she was hit in the face with a flag during a practice. Now, a lot of people originally found it suspicious that there was no blood found on the second pair of shoes that were located under his body, but the running theory for why there was no blood found on the other pair of shoes is because that the blood that was dripping from Kendrick's head dripped around the shoes. The shoes were located somewhere underneath his head, but not at the angle where the blood would have dripped on them. So that's the theory, that the blood just dripped around the shoe, and that's why there was no blood found on those shoes. But a lot of people also thought that because he was bleeding and his face was so bruised after he had been pulled out from the mat, that he had been beaten to death and then placed in the mat afterwards. But the bruising and the blood can be easily explained, and the blood that was found in the mat is actually something known as purge blood, which is a mixture of body fluids that include blood that leaks from all of the orifices, including eyes, nose, and mouth, after death in the decomposition process. Now, I know that might be more information than some of you may have wanted to hear, but I think it's necessary to understand what happens to the body during the decomposition process after death to fully understand what happened to Kendrick. Our bodies aren't really meant to be upside down for an extended period of time, and because of that, the parts of your face can't really hold blood as well as the lower parts of your body. So when you're face down and blood is pooling into your head, sooner or later, in a way, your face is going to kind of leak. And again, I know some of this might seem unnecessary to tell, but in this situation, I think it's worth knowing. Now, the day after Kendrick was found, Reverend Floyd Rose of Valdosta Southern Christian Leadership Conference was approached by a Johnson family member and asked to run an independent investigation into Kendrick's death. And from that day forward, the Valdosta SCLC worked with the family. And later on, the NAACP also got involved and ran their own investigation. Later, an autopsy done by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation determined that Kendrick Johnson died from positional asphyxia, which basically means that he died from not being able to breathe in the position that he was in. And the case was ruled an accidental death by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office. And they hypothesized that Kendrick died after falling into the mat while reaching for one of his shoes and died after not being able to breathe, basically. And as you may have guessed, a lot of people didn't believe that that was possible.
Stuck. A tragic accident.
Said it was no foul play. He had no bruises, no nothing.
Did you believe that?
No.
And you still don't believe it?
No, I don't.
They think the story about the mat is a cover-up.
So I actually found a video of some people who took it upon themselves to test and see if it was possible to become stuck in a wrestling mat and what would happen to someone if they were stuck in a mat.
We're going to do a test. I believe his name was Kendrick, and he was inside of a mat. A lot of people don't believe it. We're going to tip him up to demonstrate, and we want to show you guys how it's very difficult to get out of it.
Like 6
and
foot?
This guy's, he's 6 feet tall, and if he was vertical in a mat, this is what would happen. Go ahead and let's tip him up. Felicia, can you help?
Should I get out first?
No, just move your hand.
Yeah. So, we're showing you right now. Go ahead and yell. Yell for help. Yell for help. Can you hear me?
Yell again.
See how nobody would hear that? You say it loud. Nobody can hear him. Wow. Try to get out. Try to get out. Try to knock it down. Try to knock it down. See, he can't. Now let's tip him over.
And I think this video actually answers a lot of questions that some people had about what actually happened to Kendrick. I, for one, honestly believe that if Kendrick got stuck upside down in that mat, that he should have probably been able to maybe tilt himself over and make the mat fall over, which this video proves is almost impossible. Another question I think this video answers is why no one would have been able to hear Kendrick asking for help if people walked into that gym 3 minutes after he entered it. But now, after watching this video, I can see that they probably just didn't hear him, especially since there were other mats surrounding him. And who knows, maybe at that 3-minute mark when they walked in, he had already passed out. And Lieutenant Stride Johnson, who headed up the investigation for the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, stated, "We never had credible information that indicated this was anything other than an accident." But the Johnson family questioned this hypothesis and were unsatisfied with the results of the investigation. And in June 2013, with the financial and administrative help of the NAACP and the SCLC, the Johnson family arranged for Kendrick's body to be exhumed for an independent autopsy to be done by a private pathologist named Dr. William Anderson. And it was during this autopsy that it was famously found that Kendrick's organs were replaced with newspapers, which was actually something that was done a lot up until the 70s. I guess it was just a cheaper alternative than embalming someone or filling them with something else. But I understand if you just saw this on the news that a boy's body was exhumed and they found his body full of newspaper, you'd think, wow, that's really suspicious. But the state of Georgia also determined that though it may have not been the best practice, there was nothing illegal about what they did. And for all we know, that might have been what that specific funeral home did with all the bodies that they received. But Dr. Anderson also went on to dispute the GBI's findings, and he actually determined that Kendrick died from blunt force trauma to the right part of his neck. And he came to that determination after discovering a 2 to 3 centimeter bruise on the right side of Kendrick's neck. But I do want to point out that Dr. Anderson never stated that the bruises found on Kendrick's face had anything to do with him being beaten up. And he actually thought that the bruises could be simply explained by the way Kendrick fell into the mat. And I'm not really sure where the Kendrick was beaten and killed and then rolled into the mat later story really came from, but I do know that Dr. Anderson's findings have been used to bolster that argument, even though he never stated that that's what he thought happened to Kendrick. But due to Dr. Anderson's findings and the advocacy of the NAACP and the SCLC, in October of 2013, the Department of Justice agreed to open an investigation into Kendrick's death. And a month later in November, over 290 hours of video surveillance from 35 cameras at LHS that were located outside or near that gym was released to CNN. And a forensic analysis enlisted by CNN found that tapes from 2 cameras were missing an hour and 5 minutes of footage, while another set was missing 2 hours and 10 minutes of footage, which led many people to believe that the footage was doctored. However, the apparent lapses in coverage were found to result from camera systems that weren't synchronized with each other. Timestamps between some separate camera systems differed by as much as 20 minutes for the same time period, giving the impression of a gap where no gap existed.
Kendrick's path takes him through C wing of the building, following his 3rd block class, which was dismissed at 1:25. We see the smiling 17-year-old make the turn and continue past the guidance and administration offices. Unlike earlier video, this video contains a timestamp from the surveillance system servers, and we can witness Kendrick enter the hallway to the gymnasium at 1:27. This time is likely accurate as it coincides with the number of students in the hallways as they would be changing classes at 1:25. Kendrick continues unimpeded down the hallway, passing other students and entering the gym at around 1:28. Note the timestamp from the still image displays a time of 12:59. Different time syncs between surveillance servers means the hallway camera was behind by 29 minutes. Cameras mounted inside the gym, which captured images of Kendrick after he passed through the doors, are on a 3rd server, whose timestamp is 10 minutes ahead of the cameras in the hallway leading to the gym. Kendrick and another student disappear from the image after this frame as they are both now outside the limits of the motion detection system that activates the camera. The next frame shows several students passing by. A student wearing a bright green shirt is joined by a student wearing a blue shirt. These same students can be seen on the hall camera passing through the entrance of the gymnasium approximately 3 minutes after Kendrick. Accounting for the 1 frame per second capture rate of the cameras means that 3 minutes of surveillance footage translates into 18 seconds of real time. This suggests that the time between the last frame of Kendrick and the next frame on the surveillance video is approximately the same 18 seconds. For the Valdosta Daily Times Online, I'm Brandon Powers.
And other missing footage was the result of a camera system that was motion activated. So at a certain point when there was no motion going on, the camera would stop recording. And there is a very detailed article done by the Valdosta Daily Times that explains the video discrepancies way better than I'll even attempt to explain it. So if you do want to read that, I will leave a link to it like always in the description down below. But with that being said, the investigation done by the Department of Justice came to the same conclusion that the last investigation did, that Kendrick's death was a tragic accident. And the SCLC, which was also doing a separate investigation, came to the same conclusion, which was a shock to the Johnson family and other people who believed that Kendrick's death was far from an accident. Many believing that Kendrick was killed by 2 brothers, Brian and Braden Bell. But it was later determined that they were not only friends with Kendrick, but they were also nowhere near Kendrick at the time of his death. Now, a lot of other things happened in this case, including multiple lawsuits filed by the Johnson family and a couple of lawsuits filed against the Johnson family for defamation. But I'm going to skip over most of that. But if you do want to learn more about the particular lawsuits that the Johnsons filed and the lawsuits that were filed against them, like always, there are links down below to every website and every article I used for the information in this video. So like I mentioned, on June 20th of 2016, the Department of Justice announced that they would not be filing any criminal charges in the death of Kendrick Johnson, stating after extensive investigation into this tragic event, federal investigators determined that there is insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone or some group of people willfully violated Kendrick Johnson's civil rights or committed any other prosecutable federal crimes. And on August 10th of 2017, a judge ruled that the Johnson family and their attorneys had to pay up to $292,000 in legal fees to the people who they falsely accused of having something to do with the death of their son. Now, I personally do believe that Kendrick Johnson's death was accidental, and I think the theory that the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office brought forward is the most probable. Kendrick walked into the gym that day and he saw that the mat that he used to store his things was pushed a little further back than it used to be. So he climbed up the bleachers, crawled over a couple of the other mats, and reached in to try and grab his shoes. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but Kendrick was 5'10", about 160 pounds, and the wrestling mat, once it was put upright, was about 6 feet tall. So if you're 5'10", you're looking at that, you think, I can reach down in there, grab my shoes, and get out. So what I'm thinking happened is while he was doing that, he may have slipped in and just got stuck. And he panicked. He was kicking around, maybe trying to tip the mat over, and that's when his shoes maybe fell off. And by the time other students got into the gym, Kendrick was probably already passed out, and if not dead already, very close to being dead. So like I said, I do believe that this was a very unfortunate accident. But with that being said, I don't necessarily blame the Johnson family for thinking something else happened that day. I'm sure it can be very hard to come to terms with the fact that you lost anyone in your family, especially a child, and to also learn that there was some mystery behind exactly what happened to this person. I'm sure that that affected them in a very dramatic way, and the only thing they could think of is there had to be something else involved, which if I was in that situation, I would probably think the same thing. It's been stated that Kendrick wouldn't have been able to fit into that mat if he had just crawled in, and that is reasonable, but that's not what happened. He fell in. So when you have 160 pounds being pushed downward with the force of gravity into that, it's going to fit into it very snugly, and he is going to get trapped and not be able to get out. And because it was so tight in that mat, his chest wouldn't have been able to expand in order for him to get air into his lungs, which would lead to suffocation. A completely horrible way to die. That's got to be in my top 3 of worst ways to die. But it's something that easily could have happened. And if there had been even one other person in that gym with Kendrick, this tragic accident would have been a funny story that his friends would have told everyone during a party the night of graduation or the night after graduation about one of the funny memories that they had while they were in high school. But unfortunately, because there was no one else there, this potentially fun story told between friends became a very tragic accident that left the family without their son. But that's all I have to say about this. Let me know what you guys think about this case. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Doing any of those 3 things very much helps this video and this channel grow. So I really appreciate all that you guys are doing. So until next video, I hope you guys stay safe. I hope you guys continue to have a great day, great week, great month, great year. And I will catch you next video.